Please put a round of applause and let us welcome Nilesh ji on stage. Thank you so
much. Namaskar, everyone. I don't know if your smartphones are already off, but if you are on, I want to take those out for a minute. Not to turn them off, by the way. Okay, you can turn them off if you like afterwards. But before I start, I want to take you quickly through last 7,500 years of Indian history. Okay, just in a few minutes. I have a water. How many of you, before coming here, have listened to, just maybe by coincidence, maybe intentional, say either you have read one of my books, one of the 3 books, or you have watched one of my talks. So let me turn, lots of hands up. Thank you. You can go home. Let me ask the other questions. Before coming here, any one of you here who has never heard before, other than maybe the flyers that are going around, that don't count. But before that, like have not heard the name, have not read the book, and not watched any of the episodes, okay? Actually a significant number. Thank you again. This is a weekend, and you have a lot of homework over the weekend to do. Anytime some speaker stands up and starts speaking, I have been in the audience many, many times, so I know how that feels. One of the fear that most of us have, including myself, is how long this guy is going to blabber. So let me reassure you, I'll go for 1 hour, so you know it's coming to an end. Okay? Another way, in case you get bored, there is another way to make it shorter. Any point in time you think, that's getting boring, clap loudly and I will stop. Okay? So with that, if your phones are on, how many of you happen to, between last night and this morning, a YouTube channel called Pracham, Prachyam, that's a channel, and the dating of the Mahabharata, that was the 40-minute long documentary that came out. How many of you have seen it? Okay. For others, I would very much encourage you to take time over the weekend and see if you can go to that YouTube channel Pracham, Prachyam, okay, and watch that 40-minute documentary. Okay, that will set you for last 7,500 years of Indian history, but for the very reason, the world history. Because this event had a significant effect, especially the Asia and the Europe and the Middle East. Okay, so there's a lot of things that happen after the Mahabharata war that has these effects that can be seen in 20+ disciplines of science as they relate to Middle East, as they relate to Asia, and as they relate to Europe. Okay, so with that, I think there is a small introduction or some film here, so let's begin with that. Now, I don't mean to be impolite, but here is to set the stage. The history of humanity that you know from academia, from the textbooks, from your school, most of it, not everything, is wrong. The history of civilizations you might have known is also wrong. That's not to say everything that you have read is wrong. I'm not saying that. Just as a metaphor, if you have seen the wall clock, they are gone these days. But if you see a wall clock, and let's say it has ran out of battery, even that wall clock shows the time correctly twice a day. So yes, you do see some things correctly written. Number of you would know who this person is. How many of you know this person? Yuval Harari. Okay? A lot of things that he has written in his famous book, The Sapiens, is wrong. Here is the book, in case you have not seen it. Okay? Notwithstanding what Bill Gates is saying at the bottom of it. Okay? Doesn't matter. Okay? What you watch on National Geographic, I mean, I'm a fan of this channel and I watch a lot of stuff. A lot of that stuff is wrong. All I'm saying is, you have been scammed, period. But also let me take you back to the time. You must be thinking, this puffed up guy is saying everyone is wrong. No, let me take you back to the time when I believed all of this. I have read Yuval Harari's book multiple times, made my own notes, and Yuval Harari is just an example I took because most of you would know him. Let's go back to the time, the curious 8-year-old Nilesh, looking at the world in a very curious fashion. And I was fascinated, very curious about everything that I was seeing. I read voraciously. I remembered things and recollected during my exams, and therefore I graduated. Now, this is a picture from Canada when I completed my master's in chemical engineering. And during this time, some of the fascinating things happened. When I left India when I was 20 years old and went to Canada after my bachelor in chemical engineering, I had a significantly good number of professors, and I'll just mention about one. But he said something, and I took that message with me. So all along, I was curious, and I said, let me just ask some questions. Something fascinating that I find, for example. So I'm going to share some questions with you and see if this information you have, if that fascinates you. For example, the Rigveda, the Veda. Some people may just know at that. Supposedly, the oldest surviving composition text, whatever you want to call it, of humanity, not just for India. Do you find it surprising? Because I did. Why tigers are not mentioned in the entire Rigveda, which was basically composed and eventually written in the greater India. Now, do you know right now, 75% of surviving tigers are in India, in the whole world. But Rigveda doesn't mention tiger even once. Star names around the world, not just in India. Where do the star names for the bright stars in the sky, where they come from, who gave them those names, and why those names were given? When I looked at this picture, I thought of my childhood days in the Western India, and my classmates very much look like this, including myself, by the way. Can you guess where this picture is from? Indigenous Australians. How did indigenous Australians evolve? When I saw this picture, did they travel from other continents? Because my classmates in my younger years very much looked like this. I could even name them. Did they travel to other continents? And if so, when and how? Now, I'm sure you have heard the different datings, 50,000 and 65,000. Everyone familiar with that? Definitely 50,000, possibly up to 65,000, and we'll see why possibly 65,000. But did they migrate from here to a place like India, and that's why the similarities, the different technical words, I'll skip those, phytogenic similarities and whatnot, phylogenetic similarities. Or did they come from there, or maybe some other things and other places? What I'm showing you, all you're going to see time and time again, every time the x-axis, more or less, is going to be time. The x-axis will always be time, and approximately we will be looking at 150,000 years. That's the typical axis. What you are seeing on the y-axis here is the sea level rise. Rise up and down, up and down. So in fact, where we are is to my left here, that is where we are. And from there, if you look at the curve, last 20,000 years, sea level is only rising. everywhere around the world. But if you go before that, before that, 120,000 years, before 20,000 years, the sea levels is actually coming down. Of course, like a stock market. It's not very smooth, okay? It's ups and downs. But the question, actually, you can ask many questions, but should I worry about the global warming? And you know, there are Nobel Prizes won for the global warming, and it's a huge industry and all of that. And I'm not saying you have to take position one way or the other. That's not even the subject I want to talk about. But should I worry about it? And if the sea level will rise further? Again, that's not the subject. But if you look at the graph, I would say maybe, and I don't know the answer, but maybe we have come back to where we started 140,000 years ago. That doesn't mean, you know, people in Mumbai and New York and LA should rest peacefully. That's not to say that. But actually, we are coming back almost to that complete cycle, about 140,000 years. And my wife is in the audience, you know, so why do I consider my wife, Ashwini, as my rotor? Like, this is an aircraft engine, General Electric new engine that they're working on for the same company I worked for 20 years, including I sold aircraft engines, because she allows me, I'm extremely disorganized individual, and she allows me to keep all my things organized. Maybe that's the reason, or maybe I feel like a powerful turbojet engine, you know, one of the two reasons. Professor Wheeler, how many of you have heard the name Richard Feynman? Okay, he was a professor of Richard Feynman, okay, the PhD guide, and something that he said, it really fascinated me and started my journey. In any field, you might have heard this in many different forms, in any field, find the strangest thing and then go explore it. Or in other language, find the toughest problem in any field of your choice and go solve it. You may be successful in solving it, and that's great. But even if you are not successful, in the process, you are going to solve many other problems that you are not even aware. And even if you don't do that, you will still have a blast. So I started with this. So some of the questions that I already said, but let me add few more things to it. So I searched for the strangest thing, and I went after those. Again, x-axis is time, 150,000 years. And on the y-axis, what you are seeing is something technically. How many of you are molecular biologist or a geneticist in the crowd? No one? Okay, I can bluff. Okay. What you have there is a ratio called NE, which is to say a variety in the X chromosomes, like a female or matrilineal chromosomes, divided by the variety of the male Y chromosomes. That is the ratio there. Okay, everyone can relate to that? X chromosomes and a Y chromosomes. Okay. We will revisit this slide, but I want to ask you is this. Let me explain that noise level, the 3. Let us say, what's the name you want to select for Australia? A common name in Australia? I'll take from cricket or something. You know, Alan Border, I know that, okay? So let's say someone, Mr. and Mrs. Border, okay, just walks into this auditorium. And what would you say? Mr. and Mrs. Border walked into the auditorium. But if you are a molecular biologist, that's not what you say. You say 3 X's and 1 Y entered the auditorium. Everyone understands that? Okay, XX plus XY. And so at any given time, when nothing special is happening, the noise, the normal thing that you see is what? 3 X's to 1 Y. Everyone understands that? That is my noise. That line, the red line at the bottom, that says noise. That's what I have drawn. Against that line, forgive me, do you see some deviations? There are many, but I want to specifically focus on 3. One is around about 70,000 years ago. Another one is about 56,000 years ago. And the last one, the biggest one, is 7,500 years ago. Everyone sees that? Okay, we'll come back to that. This is a bit of a quick slide, but when I saw this is a very recent paper, last 20 years. How, why, and when did the Indian cows go to Europe and Africa, but especially Africa? Okay, and what is the connection between the Taurian cows? Everyone knows Taurus cows, like the solid, the flat hump, versus the Zebu Indian cows, the big hump. Okay, what's the difference? But also, what is their relationship? Okay, that's kind of surprised me. The picture that you are seeing, how many of you are from the Indian state of either Telangana or what is the other name now? Andhra Pradesh. Okay, so I cannot bluff, huh? Okay, this archaeological site is from a place called Jwalapuram in the Kurnool district. What you are seeing, forget the top portion, but just the bottom portion there, the trench. At the bottom there is a soil, and in between there is a thick ash layer. And above that there is a soil again. And the question I want to ask is, did sapiens, all of us, thinking humans supposedly, did sapiens of India survive the largest known explosive volcanic eruption of the last million years? And what were the effects of that on the rest of the world, including Australia? Okay. How many of you know who this guy is? Okay. Something, when I read this, extremely fascinating, why Hanuman, those of you who may not know the Ramayana, okay, the monkey god, that's the typical word used for so that everyone is familiar with it, okay? Why Hanuman describes his travel to Lanka from India, you can say, travel to Lanka from India, like the travel of nakshatra. Nakshatra is a fixed stars in the sky. There are 27 nakshatra stars. One of the nakshatra is called Swati. Anyone Swati in the audience? Ooh, stand up please, for there are multiple ones. Your name is Swati? No. Okay, 1, 2. Anyone else? No, this is all about you ladies. So the nakshatra or the star by definition does not move at all. In Sanskrit, nakshatra, naksharati iti nakshatra. Sanskrit is an extremely scientific language. It's evolved from the first principle. Like, we say ha, ma. And each of this word, depending on the context you say it, from that the language evolved. Naksharati iti nakshatra, the one that does not move. But Hanuman is saying, I'm going to jump from India to Lanka, to Ravana's Lanka, and I'm going to travel just like the star Swati. For those who don't know what that is, Arcturus in the sky. The way it travels, I'm going to travel like this. Why does he say that? And do you know when he's saying this? He's saying this 14,000 years ago. Okay, we'll see possibly why that is so. So this was a very fascinating for me, why the fixed star is moving. And the same chart that you saw before, if Indian antiquity is so deep, like people ask me, as Mr. Oak, you seem to assert, meaning it's backed by evidence, how come or why do we not find the evidence for receding sea levels in Itihasa, Purana, other Indian text? Okay, we'll look at that. You know who this is? Domestic mouse. So this is a 2007 Bonhomme paper from Germany. And when I read that about 2007, 2008, before 2010, I was shocked and surprised. This is a domestic mouse. And when a genetic study was performed, and now that you don't know, I can say whatever I want to say there, but when they take the genetics of the mouse, the domestic mouse, and there is a word called coalescence, like, it's like in time going backwards, try to see where you find their original home and when. The when is kind of a questionable, but what is not questionable is for all the domestic mouse species around the world, if you go back in time, their original home is in India. This is Bonhomme's paper 2007. How many of you are from Uttar Pradesh, the state of India? You should feel proud. Because within India, if you're looking for their home, it is UP for domestic mouse. Well, that is one of the center of agriculture. I'm not saying the only center, okay? And that's the reason. We'll look at why that is so. How many of you have seen an elephant before? okay, in the zoo or circus or somewhere else. How many of you have seen an elephant with 4 tusks? Some of you might have, actually, yeah. Where did you see the elephant with 4 tusks? Ha! Thank you. In Ramayana, the same Hanumana that I mentioned, the composer of Valmiki Ramayana, Valmiki, that's why we call it Valmiki Ramayana. Was he crazy? I thought when I read this description, if you can read Sanskrit, that's down there, who describes elephants with 4 tusks guarding Ravana's palace, but also his airplane known as Pushpaka. Many of you have heard that? Again, going back to 14,000 years. What are we talking? Are we crazy? Airplane 14,000 years ago? Okay, but let's focus on the 4-tusked elephant for now. Okay. How many of you have seen this structure before? Good number. Anyone wants to tell me where it is? In Peru, on the west coast of Peru. Now, when the Spanish people came there about 500 years ago, they asked the locals, like, did you create this? And I don't know if you watch Simpsons, but like the Bart, just like Bart, they say, no, we didn't do it. They say, what about your forefathers? Did they do it? Your grandpa? No, it was always there. Do you know who created? No, we don't know. Anyone knows why it was created? We don't know. So I was just curious, what is it? Where is it? Who created it? When and why? Now, this journey was kind of the backwards, meaning I started with Valmiki Ramayana, and it took me to Peru. Okay, so this was kind of an interesting journey. We hear about the global flood myths everywhere, in all the texts of the world, all the indigenous traditions. Okay, I'm not saying it's because of this, but let me tell you, there was indeed a global flood, not so much the flood, but a sudden sea level rise all around the world in a very specific millennium, very specific century, and as far as the Indian history is concerned, a very specific year, 5525 BCE. Okay? And you can find 30 plus. I mean, I have found 30 plus. You can find many more different data points around the world. So what was the cause of a sudden sea level rise in 5525 BC? That's one question. We may not go into that. Okay, the answer is Antarctica. But was this sudden rise the cause of global flood myths? I think that was the question I had. And I started questioning and see if I can get answer. This is a very typical question I get in America when I give lectures through universities. They said, that's fine, but recently I visited India, and this is going on for the last 30 years because I'm in America for 35 years. So this story is from even that time. They said, but India, like you here, it was a very sophisticated place, very place with a prosperity, but that's not exactly what we see right now when we go back there. So, I mean, when we visit India. Now, I don't know if you have seen this chart. How many of you are from finance industry? Okay, and business, so you would have seen this. This is Angus Madison's research work. And so from our times, if you go back for 2,000 years, what do you see actually? Just go back as far as you can. Okay, and that is the world share of GDP. In fact, if you go back close to 2,000 years, what do you see? India, based on the available data, India had the highest contribution, close to 30%, 33%. Everyone sees that, what I'm saying? And if you want to safely extrapolate, now that's never safe, but you might say there may be even a better prosperity if you go back, and we are going to see some evidence of that. But so what caused that prosperity, like 33% of world GDP, if you go back 2,000 years, and why it declined? Okay, why it declined? The answers are very easy. I will not go there. You can look at the world history events for the last 2,000 years and see its effect on India, when it exactly happened, and you can make a perfect correlation. Okay? This is the professor I was talking about. Like when I left, that time he did not have a Padma Bhushan, which is what? India's third highest award, civil award, Padma Bhushan. But he won it in the last 15 years. But I had a pleasure, I was fortunate to work in his lab when I was an undergrad student. And I'm not saying he told it to me. I don't think he thought me to be that bright at all. But as a generic thing, he used to tell all his master's and PhD students, and I was only undergrad student, he said, if you focus on any subject, and he really meant focus, if you focus on any subject for 2 years, you can be the best in the world. Now, he didn't necessarily say that to me, but I said that's for me. So anything that fascinated me, I said, if I'm going to go into it, I'm going to actually follow his rule and see if I can give full dedication to that subject. And actually, that paid dividends. This is a sky map of University of Alberta, where I did my master's. The very reason I am standing in front of you today, and very reason possibly you came to listen to me, it started at University of Alberta in 1994. I'm not going to tell you that story because I told you you're going to watch the Prachyam documentary on dating the Mahabharata, and it will tell you what it is. But it is exactly the same library where it all started, and I and myself, along with my wife Ashwini, we visited 30 years after, and I'm standing right into that alleys and pulling the exactly same book, the copy of Mahabharata. But many other things that happened during those 3-4 years of my time at University of Alberta, and actually I'm very happy to share many of those today with you. So let's revisit all the questions that I asked. Before that, let me ask you, how many of you had similar questions as you grew up? Okay, yeah, so I'm not alone. Okay. Let's see if we explore what do we find. So this chart here, how many of you were fascinated by this? That if you go back 140,000 years, the sea levels, the mean sea level, was more or less exactly same as what we have today. Everyone understands that? Go back 140,000 years, that highest peak there, and come to today's time, more or less the same thing. And the question is, if Indian antiquity is so deep, do we find anything? Just I'm going to give you a formula of 7, the multiplication table of 7. Mahabharata happened, based on my research, I have shown that with sufficient evidence, that it happened more than 7,000 years ago. Ramayana, okay, itihasa, both of them are itihasa, Sanskrit, iti, ha, asa, meaning this is how it happened. Thus it happened. Ramayana happened more than 14,000 years ago, and you can go back 21,000, 28,000, and so on. You come to 35,000 years before us. So that was the question people were asking me. So yeah, great. Mahabharata 7,500 years ago, Ramayana 14,000 years ago, that's it? And it cannot be, because both Ramayana and Mahabharata mentions Rigveda, mentions all 4 Vedas. So they have to be before that. Everyone understands the logic? Yes? If Ramayana mentions it, Mahabharata mentions it, they have to be before that. I say, where is it? What I found in Maitrayani Aranyak, one of my co-researcher, Rupa Bhati, she's an architect by profession, and what she found, so it's her research that I'm presenting for this going back 35,000 years before us. How many of you have heard the word Ikshwaku? The solar dynasty of India, okay, in which Bhagwan Ram took birth. That Ikshwaku dynasty, there was another king, actually. There were many kings. His name was Brihadratha. And in this Maitrayani Upanishad, he is talking about the evidence that we can use, and it takes us back to 35,000 years. I'll not take you into the technicalities. In astronomy, he's saying the very bright pole star, it's shifting from its pole position. That's one. He says the spring equinox is in the nakshatra Magha, which is star Regulus. So sun's position in Regulus when that is happening. And one more thing, that is what you can see on the screen. He says the sea levels are going down. In fact, it's so scary. The sea is running away from us. Seas are drying. That is what we see. Now, what do we know is this? In last 20,000 years, the seas are not drying. Actually, they are coming closer to us. The sea level is rising. In fact, the entire Indonesia and that area, there was a lot of land called Sunda, and it's just gone underwater. But he's saying that actually seas are drying, seas are going away from us. If you bring these 3 data points, 2 from astronomy, 1 from oceanography, bingo. It takes you to where I have drawn those 2 vertical lines about 35,000 years ago, 34,500 BCE. And we had a well-established civilization. You can read more about Brihadrat if you do that. Okay? But not only that, I mean, this data, this is not happening in 1 year, this is not happening in a decade, this is not happening in 100 years. So the sea levels are drying. In order to say that, or sea levels are receding, you have to have a baseline data. So there is a tradition of the maintenance of the record, just like we do that in the university and peer-reviewed papers and journals and whatnot. Same thing with the pole star. Pole star moves. How many of you knew that the pole star does move? How many of you did not know that the pole star moves? Ooh, something new today, right? Actually, pole stars moves. You know, Earth's axis is pointing in some direction. It's very slow, but it goes like this and completes one circle in 26,000 years. Only 26,000 years. In fact, you can see the Earth's motion like this. Earth is rotating around itself. Everyone knows that? Yes? Then Earth is going around the sun in 365 days. Everyone knows that. There are many motions of Earth, but I'm going to tell you 2 more, and that's all we need to know. The other one is like a Japanese bow. So this Earth's axis, it goes like this. And to go from here to here and then back again, just a 2-degree journey, it takes 41,000 years. And then Earth's axis kind of going like this. That's 26,000 years. And all of these motions and the changes because of it, you can see that in an Indian text, from Rigveda to Ramayana to Mahabharata and other texts. So I just mentioned you an event that takes us back to 35,000 years. Same pictures we are going to look at. What is interesting about this? This is in the southern part of India. Below that ash layer, there are stone tools, meaning there were sapiens there were human beings there. And above the ash layer, there are stone tools immediately, which means whatever that thing happened, do you know what was that happened? It's known as a Toba explosion in Indonesia, the Sumatra island, just the tip of Sumatra island, very close to India, called Aceh Banda. You might have heard the name because of the tsunamis and whatnot. 2004 tsunami, for example. But this Aceh Banda, like from that area, like Sumatra, a biggest volcanic eruption of last 1 million years. And all the ash came towards India, I mean, not just India, the Tibet, and east of India, west of India, Arabian Sea, everywhere you can see the evidence, everywhere, even today. But there are tools above that ash layer, there are tools below the ash layer. We don't know who these people are, well, Indians. But they were there before, and they survived, and they were also there. I'm going to take you to the genetic data. Just please remember, this happened 72,000 BC, about 75,000 years ago. On the genetic map, remember, I referred to the 3 changes. One is happening around 70,000 years. It is because of this. So we are looking at a geological data, we are looking at archaeological data. We can connect that one-on-one with genetics data. How fascinating. That genetics paper is from 2015, Monica Carmen, okay? Right there, so I'm glad I put it right there. Okay, so that ash layer that you saw is from about 70,000, 75,000 years. So you can see that, you know, between 75,000 down to 70,000, everyone sees that? From the noise is coming down. Now what is going down? Can anyone tell me? The NE ratio is the variety in the X chromosomes divided by variety in the Y chromosomes. So if that curve, that NE is going down, what is the bottleneck? Is it the bottleneck in the X chromosomes or Y chromosomes? X chromosomes. The correct answer on the exam, kids, is X chromosomes. Now this is really fascinating. We don't know the reasons what happened, but which means when the Toba explosion happened, many ladies, many females, they actually lost their lives. And actually in a significant number. Do you know why? Because reduction in X chromosomes is not that easy, because the noise ratio is 3:1. So to see the reduction in the X variety, you have to have a significant loss of the X chromosomes. Okay, we don't know why it happened, but we definitely conclude that that's exactly what happened. Many of the females simply lost the life in comparison to male. Okay, that's what caused it. We will skip the 56,000 peak just for the sake of time. But then you see another one, a biggest one, that is what? Exactly at 7,500 years ago. Okay, let me see if I can take you to that answer. I'll give you a short answer because the documentary that I ask you to watch as a homework, it goes into the details. But how many of you are familiar with the Mahabharata in a generic sense? No detailed question. Okay, so let's discuss that. How many days the Mahabharata war lasted? Anyone? 18. Okay, good answers. How many Akshohini, like a battalion or whatever we call batteries, the military men, how many Akshohini military men fought in that war? 18. Something magical about 18. Okay? And do you know how many warriors in one Akshohini? I'll give you that. What is it? Somebody give the answer? Sorry, I cannot hear, but the answer is about 200,000 in one Akshohini. So crudely, 18 times 200,000, about 4 million men fought for the 18 days, and practically 99.99% were gone in those 18 days. To keep me honest afterwards, you can go to Google and see what was the estimated population of the world 7,500 years ago. Don't do that right now. You will find the range is huge. There are 14 to 17 different predictions based on all kinds of modeling. But the range is, say, from 2 to 50 million, okay? 2 to 40 million, something like this. Just for simplicity, let's take the median number. About 20 million is, let's say, the world population. Stay with me, huh? So 18 Akshohini is equal to 4 million men. Just keep that number. The world population is about the median number, 20 million. The folks who fought during the Mahabharata war, they came from Syria in the west to Indonesia in the east, okay, along that kind of tilted east-west axis. They fought for 18 days, and most of those warriors were gone. So let's say the population that's connected with that region from Syria to Indonesia is about half of the world's population, so say 10 million. So if there are 10 million population in that area, statistically what? 5 million men, 5 million women. Everyone with me? Okay, just a simplified exercise. Out of that, in 18 days, 4 million men are gone. So how many men we are left with? 1 million and 5 million women. What is that ratio? I'm just making a very crude answer. Huh? That's not how genetics works exactly. So 5 million men to 5 million women to 1 million men, that's 5:1 ratio. That's on a relative scale. On an absolute scale, just like a just like an earthquake, when you see the earthquake, you ask the questions, how serious was it? What was the Richter scale? Where did it happen? When did it happen? Think of this Mahabharata war as a genetic earthquake leading to a Y chromosomes, male chromosomes bottleneck. Suddenly 4 million men are gone in 18 days. That's what it is causing that peak. But I'm not done. So the Richter scale of this genetic earthquake is how much? On an absolute scale, about 17:1. Everyone follows? If you look at the y-axis, 17:1. On the relative scale, electrical engineers in the crowd, electric and electronics, yeah, signal to noise ratio. Okay, so 17 divided by 3 or 16 divided by 3. What is that? Electrical engineers? About 5:1? Yes? No? Okay, about 5:1. So I just gave you the numbers from a Indian text, Mahabharata, the number of warriors. And if we look at the current data on the population estimates, along with Monica Carmin's 2015 papers, that's exactly what we see. But we need to ask two more questions, just like the earthquake. So we know the genetic earthquake or genetic quake scale, yeah, it's very serious. The serious one in the last 150,000 years. Two more questions. When did it happen? The answer is there on the screen. When did it happen? 7,500 years ago. The last question. Where did it happen? Now, you don't know. If you look at Monica Carmin papers, just like earthquake has an epicenter, the epicenter for this genetic earthquake, if I can use that word, is India. Okay? So this is how you connect the dots. So I came to that 5561 BC as the year of Mahabharat war, not based on genetics, not based on oceanography, purely based on astronomy descriptions from the Mahabharata text, about 300 of them. How many of you have played jigsaw puzzle when you were a kid or even now? Crossword puzzles? Okay. Imagine what we have in the Ramayana and Mahabharata is a combination of a jigsaw puzzle and a crossword puzzle. And if you can solve it using modern day science, technology at your disposal, for Mahabharata, it takes you to 5561 BC and no other year. For Ramayana, the Ram Ravan Yuddha, the two guys fighting there, and of course, many other warriors, it takes you to one specific year, 12,209 BC. And what we are seeing is the additional evidence. In science, we call it what? Corroborative evidence, a supportive evidence to what we are saying. So, the year that is based on the internal evidence of Mahabharata, astronomy evidence, then you look at the other population dynamics like 18 Aukshayani, 40 lakhs or 4 million people, men, exclusive men, disappearing in 18 days. You can connect that with the genetics data. Let me tell you, Monica Carmin doesn't know anything about Mahabharata. They're just an international genome project. Like all the genetics data that they have, they're trying to understand the different bottlenecks and whatnot. Okay, let's go further. Okay, anyone knows what this is? Yeah? Skull, yes. Okay, fossilized skull. Long story, I'm going to make it short. Initially, when it was found, they didn't know if it was a monkey or a human being. Then they initially thought it was a male skull. And then they said, if it's a male skull based on, human male skulls, based on this, it doesn't look like a sapiens. Then when they did the further research, they found, yeah, actually it is a sapiens, but it is not a male skull, but it is a female skull. Okay, so initially because they misnamed it, it's known as a Narmada man. That became a Narmada woman after some research. Do you know how old is this? By the most conservative estimate, it is, again, it's a very range. It's anywhere from 130,000 years to 300,000 years old. Okay? And you can go actually back. So sapiens existed, but something else. Let's come back to that Hanumana. Okay, I will not explain who Hanumana is. Anyone from Karnataka? Okay. Just take it as a lightly and a humor, by the way. Okay, can you stand for a minute? Folks from Karnataka? Okay, just look at them. Okay. And the people say, but who are Vanaras? Okay, and my good friend, Dr. Shiva Shastri from Bengaluru, okay, a medical surgeon, and I said, do you know Shiva Shastri? They say, yeah. He says, Vanaras look like him. Thank you. Please have a seat. The reason I mentioned that is I just made them stand because the capital of Vanaras were Kishkinda, which is Hampi and Bellary. Okay? And so they were essentially human beings, sapiens, Indians just like us, from the southern part of India. Of course, they came from all around different parts of India and the world. Okay? That's what Ramayana tells us. Okay? But they made that place their home. What I'm going to tell you, those Swatis there again, now this is something, next time you want to do the icebreaker, now you have a story. Hanumana, 14,000 years ago, before he's going to jump from India to Lanka, he's telling other Vanaras, he says, look, I am going to go like the travel of Nakshatra Swati Arcturus. And do you know why? Because Naksharatiti Nakshatra, the nakshatras, 27 nakshatra, actually those stars do not move. That's why our great sages chose those stars as our nakshatra. Because in a clock, you don't want those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 to move. Only the arms can move. Then only we can tell the time. But if you look at the modern astronomy, and therefore ancient Indian astronomy, out of those 27 nakshatras, the one star that moves the fastest against the relative background of the sky is star Swati. And Hanumana knows it, or Valmiki knows it. He is very casually saying this. Okay? If you go back into the text like Taittiriya Samhita, Taittiriya Brahmana, long before Ramayana's time, long before 14,000 years, the Taittiriya Brahmana is at least from 23,000 BC. I'm not going into how we figure this out, okay? But there is a good evidence for that. Very interesting, those Swati Tai, Swati Didi, Swati Ben in the crowd, okay? There, this Nakshatra Swati has another name called Nishtham, okay? And in Sanskrit, that means a foreigner or a traveler. Now, there is another text, very interesting story. This is Apastamba Gruhya Sutra. Like, typical ceremonies that you do, the wedding ceremony and whatnot, how to be done. And so here, a interesting but a humorous advice is given to a father. A father who has a daughter that needs to be wedded now. And if he wants the daughter, once she goes to the groom's house, I mean the father's son-in-law's house, she should be happy and she should stay there and never come back, let's say. The Gruhya Sutra says he should marry, he should wed his daughter on Nakshatra Swati. Why? Because Nishtha means a foreigner and a traveler. You want that person, once you come to Australia, stay here, get the citizenship, something like this, okay, for example. And so, just in that one word, there is an entire history of that Nakshatra Swati. But how far? Surprise, surprise. If you go back using our modern astronomy, you find the Swati went away from where it's supposed to be or where it is now. If you go back 60,000 years, it was a pole star. It went so far up north that it could not be a nakshatra. So actually, there was a time when our 27 or 30 nakshatra did not have Swati as our nakshatra. But sometime, as the time progressed, that Swati star came from the pole star down to the area where it can be used as a nakshatra to track the positions of the planets, the moon, the sun. And because it came from outside, it came traveling and it came as a foreigner. Therefore, it was called Nishtam. One word can capture the entire history of millenniums. How did indigenous Australians evolve? What do you know about their migrations? Anyone? 50,000 years ago, supposedly, not just from India, from Taiwan and Philippines and many areas. But if you look at the genetic data, actually there is anywhere from 4 to 7%, especially Southern Indian gene, whatever you talk, haplogroups and whatnot, you can find into indigenous Australians. Humorously, I will say the indigenous word, do you know where it comes from? Anyone? India. Everyone knew that? Like, remember, go back 500, 600 years, okay? Columbus, he decided to search for India, but he decided to go west. Not my problem. He ended up in Americas. What did Vasco da Gama did? He started eastward. They all were looking for India. The sea route to India. Do you know why? Prosperity. Okay? The other guys were controlling it. So you can see in genetics once, and you can also see in other archaeology evidence their migrations, possibly post-Toba explosion. That is the time of 65,000. Okay? And in case you think I'm just guessing, this is a 2020 papers, and it's not written by Indians. So you can very safely, confidently trust the data. Look at the arrows going from, okay? These are from two researchers from Denmark. Again, they looked at the over global data, and what it is showing, that middle greenish area is they don't know exactly when, Okay? And most people don't want to show India as a homeland of anything other than Bonhomie for the rat, for the mouse. You see that many of these, not just India, today's India, guys, okay? It is essentially from Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, okay? The Turkmenistan, all that area east of Caspian Sea, okay? All this area, all the way to Indonesia, and all of this. Somewhere from that area, actually, India was like a great cuisine, the genetic cuisine. Lots of different dishes were made, and they were sent all around the world. Now, that was not the only place for genetic cuisine. There were many others, but this was the prominent one, okay? Four-tusked elephants. Now you know that, right? Yeah, you saw it today here. Until 150 years, nobody thought about it. But thanks to Darwin. Darwin made a great revolution, and people started digging everywhere. And they found lots of interesting things. Archaeology is only that old, by the way. Okay? Before that, for the West, okay, for most part, like the Bible, the Old Testament, New Testament, especially Old Testament, was history book. There were a few others, like Herodotus had the history of the world. Do you know? It's a great book, but when he said history of the world, it was really the history of the world he knew. So from Greece only crossing the Mediterranean and Egypt, it's really the area of that area that he saw firsthand, and of course what he heard about other places, and he wrote it down. A beautiful work. Okay? Now, go back to 14,000 years ago. That's the Valmiki Ramayana. Ramayana mentions elephants with 4 tusks guarding Ravana's palace and Ravana's aeroplane. We'll not go into airplane unless we go into question and answer that time. But now we know that there were creatures, or elephant-like creatures, or elephants we can say, with 2, 3, and 4 tusks as we go back in antiquity. In fact, so far in antiquity, from 9 million years, there were creatures like that, but interesting point, they lasted, they survived until about 9,000 BC or 11,000 years ago. How many of you have heard the word Younger Dryas? Okay, and that's when like a significant portion of both flora and fauna basically disappeared. So we have these species, many species, Gompotheres, Stockton, and so on. And so when is Ramayana? 14,000 years ago. So at that time, these creatures did exist. I don't know exactly where. In fact, you see the global map on the back of an elephant. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it? All the places where you see the dots, which is practically everywhere, there you could see these mammoths everywhere around the world until 9,000 BC. Remember the structure in the Peru that I showed you, right? This is now from the photo from another aeroplane with an aeroplane and the trident. They call it Candelabra of Andes. Now, I told you, when the Spanish came there, they were curious about this structure. They asked and they couldn't get the answer. What if I tell you, and some of you might have, those who have watched my podcast, you would know that already. But what if I tell you, Ramayana describes it? So when Ravana has snatched away Sita and gone somewhere, and he's hiding her somewhere that others, Ram and Lakshman, don't know, they meet Sugriv, ask for his help. Sugriva invites all the Vanaras, okay, in Hampi Bellari there, Kishkinda. He divides small groups into 4 different groups and decides to send them in the 4 directions searching for Sita. And just like, somebody, we give a directions, these days GPS does the job for us, but before we used to say, go there, and at that building, take a right turn, and so on and so forth, right? So he's giving them directions. And in the east direction, starting with India, he says, okay, go to this place that we can identify today as Thailand, go to this place, Yavadvip, we can identify it as a Java, and so on. I don't know if Australia was mentioned by him, okay, that is a good subject for you to research. But then he says, cross the Pacific, he calls it Kshirasagar, and when you go there, you are going to find a great Ananta, like a snake as if with multiple hoods. Now this is the beauty of this text. It's not very easy, just like a Japanese garden, to exactly tell when the nature stops and artificiality begins, and when the artificiality stops and nature begins. Have you been to Japanese gardens? Yeah. So like there will be a rough stone, and we think, why is this rough stone here? Well, they deliberately chose that and put it there. So that's how this discussion is. The Ananta mountain that Sugriva is referring to is Andes. And he says a symbol, an insignia of that mountain is engraved into the rocks, okay, and that is this trident. Now, if you see the Ramayana description, I have written it there. Trishira kanchanas ketus talastasya mahatmana sthapitah parvatasyagre virajati savedikaha. Like Veda, when we do the yajna, we do swaha, there is that rectangular structure, we put the fire there and so on. If you look at the bottom, I don't know if you can see it, the bottom of that trident, you can even see the rectangle. But Trishira kanchana, it's golden trident, like 3 heads. Ketu, like a pole. Okay? And what is that? Talastasya Mahatmana, a great pole, 600, 800 feet. Stapitah Parvatasagre, created at the front of this mountain. Virajati Savedika. But not only that, the next verse talks about who created, when it was created, why it was created. Purvasyadishi Nirmanam Krutan Tatri Dasheshware. The deity of the east direction, Indra, everyone knows Indra. Okay? He created it. Okay, now that may be allegorical terms there. Just like we know the international day line that goes through the Pacific, 14,000 years ago, that's the international day line. The Andes is the international day line. Okay? Tatah para hemamaya sriman udaya parvata. If you go beyond this, beyond that, the Bay of Paracas, the coast of Peru, then you see the Andes mountain covered with snow. Tatah para hemamaya sriman udaya parvata. And what if I tell you something? If you go into the Andes, now this is a research of another Australian, Indian Australian, or whichever you want to say it, okay? Mitra Desai, now she's based in Brisbane. So what he actually found is that if you go to Andes today, you find anywhere from 4 to 5 peaks which have the name Ananta. And in case you are wondering if that was given in the last 500 years, the answer is no. In fact, the Spanish folks who went there, they did not know. They tried to ask the Ayamara and Quechua Indians, the local Indians there. And they said, I don't know, but we have used that word before. Ananta. Possibly Ananta became Andes, but that's something for you to research. The mouse. Now I gave you the approximate timeline. This is one estimate that possibly, and there is evidence, there are additional papers which show the Indian mouse in as far as southern France, going back into 14,000 years ago, almost the time of Ramayana. Now, Dr. Anilji mentioned, just when he mentioned, he says, if something is found in Israel, then people are very excited, but not when it's found in India. Now, let me ask you, will you be excited if I tell you a cotton cloth or a thread of a cotton made from an Indian variety of cotton is found in Israel, and the timing of it goes back to 5,500 BCE, the timing of Mahabharata? You say, okay, tell me something interesting. No. If this doesn't excite you guys, I don't know what will. A cotton thread, of course the part of the cotton fabric, made from an Indian cotton. That's what the beauty of genetics. Genetics can say that. Genetics can tell you that. Indian cotton found in Israel 7,500 years ago. Okay? Afterwards, Google that to keep me honest. See if you can find it. But this mouse, by the most conservative estimate, they left India about 20,000 years ago. And there are some, I would say, I don't know, because I'm not a geneticist by myself, but there are certain estimates that could be as far back as, listen carefully, 300,000 years ago. I don't know if it's true or not, but there are certain estimates. It could be that far back. Okay, and now if you look at the agriculture, now you must be wondering, like, what are these domestic mouse doing in Alps, like vacation in Switzerland? No. Actually, they just don't go by themselves. They go with people, okay, who have established civilization, or people who are into agriculture, who are into domestication of cows and whatnot. When they migrate, okay, these domestic mouse go along with them. Domestic mouse is directly connected with agriculture. Okay, that's the important point. Okay. Sorry, I went further. Cows, I'll skip that, but you see the zebu cows going especially to Africa, and the relationship between the Taurus cows or Taurian cows and zebu cow, going back more than 150,000 years. I don't know exactly when. I mean, that's still a debatable issue. People are researching on it. That they say the Taurian cow is a daughter of a zebu cow. Okay, a lot more research is required. So if you are interested, that is definitely some area for you to explore. The names of the stars. Not only in India, everywhere. This is Saptarshis. Everyone recognizes that? The Ursa Major. Just a quick story on that. Ursa Major, what is it? In a simple language, the bear. Ursa is a bear. Okay? Now, what is the Indian word for this? Saptarshis, Rishi. Did I drop something? Saptarshis or Rishi. Now, the word Rishi and the word Ruksha, they are very, very similar. Okay, when you are going and talking to someone. Do you know what Rishi means? A scientist, a sage. Do you know what Ruksha means? Bear. Okay, so sometimes when the words travel, they get misunderstood. How many of you are familiar with the sine and cosine, the sine curves? Okay. Do you know that the sine curve went around the world from India? It's called Ja in astronomy. Okay? So when it went to the Arab countries, and when they're trying to explain to someone, like so, say the Europeans, through the Cordoba, through the Spain, this is a history of last 1,000 years. When the Europeans, through Spain, they ask, like, what are you talking? So they try to explain, because in Arabic word, jeb, like even we know that word, jeb means like a pocket. So typically pocket will have a shape like this, like a sine curve shape. So they say, oh, it's like the jeb. Now the word for jeb in the Latin, okay, is very close to sine. You follow the journey? The ja from trija is basically that sine, what we call sine in Sanskrit. From there it became jeb, and from jeb it became sine with a different spelling, and now we have the S-I-N or S-I-N-E. Similar to that, you see the journey of the stars. Okay? So Saptarshi, Rishi, Ruksha, possibly becoming the bear. Okay? And basically what I showed you here for a second is just to give an idea. This is Mahabharata has 300 plus astronomy references like this. Ramayana has close to 600 references for the stars, for the planet, the planetary positions, the positions of the moon, the positions of the sun, the seasons, the lunar months, the solar months, and those are the total of 900 specific descriptions combined for Ramayana and Mahabharata. You solve that as a jigsaw puzzle, crossword puzzle, it takes you to those specific dates. Tigers. I think we are concluding, okay? We started with the tigers. What do you see about the tigers? Do you know from modern research, modern, whatever the subject you want to call it, this is what we know based on the current research, that the tigers are in India definitely for the last 16 to 17,000 years. Again, you can keep me honest and do the Google search afterwards. Rigveda does not mention it even once. Just very softly, what conclusions you may draw from this? Soft conclusion, not a assured conclusion. What can you say? Rigveda is definitely more than 16,000 years. So that is one data point, but we don't have to depend on that. If you look at River Saraswati, you will find the same thing. In fact, Michael Petraglia, an Australian academic, he has done so much research. In fact, most of the research I'm presenting to you right now, I don't know if it's a good news or a bad news, it's not done by Indians. It's done by non-Indians. Michael Petraglia has done Australian academic, has done so much research about India. And he has shown, and James, another individual, they have shown that Saraswati River, which today does not exist, was flowing beautifully with lots and lots of water for at least last 200,000 years in India. And now we start looking at the Rigvedic descriptions. Nadi tame, Ambi tame, Devi tame, Saraswati. The grandest of the grand river, bigger than Sindhu, bigger than Ganga, and so on. Okay, the river that is capable of cutting the mountain tops and making them float on its water. That's how Rigveda describes Saraswati. Giribhya a Samudra, a river that flows from the high mountains, Himalayas, all the way to the ocean. We don't have that today. In fact, we don't have such a Saraswati for the last 6,000 years. In fact, the geology, geochemistry data tells us that if such a river existed, and I can tell you it did exist, now we have lots of data, it existed sometime before 10,000 years. So my point is, tigers will take you to the same conclusion, river Saraswati will also take you to the same conclusion. And the so-called the flood myth. This has to directly do with the Mahabharata. Mahabharata war happened 5561 BCE, 7,500 years ago. Mahabharata tells us that Krishna's Dwarka on the west coast of India, it was destroyed by sudden sea level rising waters, flooded and destroyed in practically instantaneously 36 years after the Mahabharata war. So 5561 BC plus 36, it takes you to 5525 BC as my prediction. Now, do I find data, archaeology data supporting it? Yes, it's on the west coast of India, it is on the east coast of India, it is in Indonesia, it is in Turkey, it is in West Indies. Every place people play cricket. Okay, it is in Australia. If you go to the northeast corner, the Great Barrier Reef, again you can go and look at the papers and see sudden sea level rise 7,500 years ago, and then practically either flat or slightly going down. If you go to the northwest corner of Australia, Barrows Island, you see the exactly same data. Sudden sea level rise, a very steep sea level rise 7,500 years ago, and then either flat or going down. And you see the same thing everywhere around the world. How many people from Gujarat? Okay, you have something to be proud of too, besides the mouse for the others, right? How many of you have heard the places, not from Gujarat necessarily, Dholavira and Lothal? Okay, how many of you have visited Dholavira and Lothal? Ah, nice. Now today if you go, it's inland. Ocean is far away from it. Now afterwards go to Google and find out when Dholavira was a port and when Lothal was a port. The answer is going to be somewhere from 5000 BC to 2000 BC or somewhere in between. Today they are inland. But the reason they were ports is there in this slide. 5525 BC, on the west coast of India, Dwarka and that area, suddenly there was a sea level rise of 15 meters. And the next 400 years, another 8 meters, total of 23 meters. In fact, it so happened that the sea level went so far up, okay, that the mean sea level was on an average 3 meters more than what it is today. Now immediately it will explain you why Dholavira was a port, why Lothal was a port. And since that time, about 5000 BC or after, the water is actually coming down. So it went down average 3 meters. Therefore, they are no longer ports. So if you may start looking for one answer, like in my case, Mahabharata dating, but you actually get the answers to questions like why Dholavira was a port, Lothal was a port, and why it is not a port today. Okay, you can start getting answers to that. The India's prosperity. Okay, how do we get prosperity, guys? Like, think of not today's times, but going back, say, 2000 years and before. What are the basic ingredients of prosperity? Agriculture, very good, and trade. I'm done. I don't need to show you the next slides, okay? So if you look at agriculture, of course, I showed you the agriculture maps and whatnot. India has the evidence of agriculture going back to 10,000 years, but also going back to 45,000 years in the peer-reviewed papers, okay? Now, same thing for the trade. Indians are trading, and therefore, rest of the world is trading for a very long time than we can imagine. Therefore, I talk about the Yuval Harari and whatnot. Yuval Harari will talk about agriculture 10,000 years ago and trade afterwards and so on. In India, the physical archaeology evidence in Tamil Nadu, what I'm showing you the pictures there, takes you to 20,000 plus years, 20,000 BC. So let's call it 20,000 years. Pumpuhar, 7 sophisticated ports. So if you have gone to Pumpuhar, or those people who know it, right now where you see the Kaveri Delta and a Pumpuhar, from there inside the ocean, there are 3 ports now underwater going back 30 kilometers inside. 30 kilometers. And that's what the last 20,000 years of sea level rising has done. It has destroyed those ports. Okay. And one more thing, if you are going to trade on the ocean, like navigate through the ocean, you need to know where you are. right? You need astronomy because they did not have a GPS then. Astronomy was their GPS. Now, did India had a sophisticated GPS, sophisticated astronomy? Absolutely. Go back and check. What is the nautical miles, total nautical miles on the equator? The answer is 21,600. Do you know who gave that 21,600? If you are into that subject, you will say French gave it. Yeah, that's true. Where did French get it? From this formula, there is a very mysterious celestial radius, 3,438, in all Indian astronomy text and nowhere else. Those of you bit who are not mathematically challenged, look at the formula. The circumference is 21,600 equal to 2 pi times 3,438. This was a mysterious number to Europeans when they came here and they became familiar with the Indian astronomy text. Okay, surprise, surprise. Why they chose 3,438? Because 21,600 minutes, arc minutes, that is the natural resolution of the sky. So in our old Microsoft days, we used to say what you see is what it prints. You remember? Something like this, what you see is what the printer will do. Something like this, what you see in the sky, you don't need to perform additional calculations. You can take that reading, look at your maps on the ship, and you know exactly where you are, based on the rising of the star, expected star at certain point. Very, very sophisticated. But something more from Surya Siddhanta. To predict the position of the sun in the sky, it's not as easy as you may think. In fact, if you go to the times of the Greek, okay, look at this dotted line is the Greek prediction, and look at the solid line, that's the Indian prediction. It's twice better than Greek. But the story is not over. This was only when the Greeks were around. But if you want to truly find out what is the precise, best accuracy of the Indian model, you have to go back in the past to Mahabharata times 50 BCE, 5,500 BC. That is where very likely, not created for the first time, but recalibrated the model of the sun. But if you think that's not true, how many of you know what is Kepler famous for? Johannes Kepler. What is his contribution to astronomy? He said the orbits are not circular, but the orbits are elliptical. What if I tell you the Indian astronomy text such as Surya Siddhanta talks of elliptical orbits of the planets at the time of Mahabharata, 7,500 years ago? That is the picture on the right. And what if I tell you the astronomy text like Surya Siddhanta talks about the elliptical planets at the time of Ramayana, 14,000 years ago? That is the picture on the left. And this is what we presented at the Oxford conference. And the last one here, and I'll stop on this, which is people ask me, why, Nilesh, why do you not write peer review papers? And I say it's basically a very inefficient process. I'm in the research institute, I'm not in the academia in the sense, there is no compulsion, there is no pressure on me to crank up peer reviewed papers for my sustenance or for my promotion. That is the reason many times these things are done. It had a very good intention, unfortunately. Now you know in the medical profession or medical journals, if you get 50% of those papers producing repeatability, you are lucky. That's the kind of performance it has. Now, so why you should pay attention to any of this? The most effective way to destroy people is to deny and obliterate their own understanding of their history. Okay? And some people have done a great job of it. You have swallowed, this is for you guys, the good part is over, okay? This is a butterscotch and a bitterscotch, okay? The bitter pill. You have swallowed the fake narratives with hook, line, and sinker wholeheartedly that you see around the world. And you think more serious research will fix the history. That's what people keep on asking. Nileshji, why don't you do research on this? Or why does the governments or Indian governments, Modi ji, whoever, give more money to dig something on the West Coast? I have a news for you. Wrong history, a bad history, will not be corrected by good research and great research. Because frankly, the good and great research is already happening. I shared some of the glimpses of it. It has happening, it has happened, it is happening. Many people are doing it. The missing piece is you. Thank you.
Wow, I could have listened to this even 2 more hours. So exciting. If I had a history teacher like him, I would have been a good student. Now we will have a question-answer session. I'm hoping that everybody has sent their questions through the QR code. If not, please do so. I would like to invite Anil ji on stage, and we'll have the question-answer.
All right. Everyone take a deep breath. A lot of information there. Nilesh ji, fascinating. We don't have too much time, but if anyone has any burning questions, please submit it through the QR code. First question, which has come up a few times, is what you have mentioned it seems so compelling. You've presented the data and the science. Why is it not accepted in mainstream academia? What are the barriers and what are the arguments of the skeptics?
Why is it not accepted in the mainstream academia? What I find is that everyone is familiar with the term STEM. It's the same as in America, STEM, science, technology, medicine, yeah? So when I run into academics from these fields, including business schools, by the way, okay, actually people are extremely accepting, one-on-one. But some people, and I'm not just saying people of Indian origin, people of human origin all over the world, will tell me, actually they will say, this is so fascinating. I say, well, would you come along with me? And they say, well, give me for 10 years, I'm retiring then I'll join you. So there is a scare in academia. Like if you go into certain fields, they will never tell you that there is no freedom of speech and freedom of thought. But the careers are shattered. The promotions are hindered. And so many people are very careful. In fact, Indology, like study of Indology, that is where people don't even understand what I talk. Okay, because very few, actually I will give you as a challenge. From Indology, inside India or outside India, please bring me some professor who understands any of this research. I have not met one.
Okay, no problem. Next question. The researchers say that the source of genetic variation was from the Iranian plateau or Tibet, not India. Should we not talk about the Indus Valley civilization instead?
Okay. So, as I said, when you see that cooking pot or cooking cuisine, whatever that is, that also included Tibet. But there is enough of research, guys, enough of research. In fact, I will ask you to just go to Google and type genetics maps of the world, okay, and just start seeing what you see. Like initial inflow from Africa and whatnot into the India, but then practically everything, both on the Y chromosome side and X chromosome side, going out of bigger India. I don't mean just the India, but Afghanistan, Iran, Tibet, and all of this. So sometimes what happens is you take a dish, cooking speak, okay, you take it to some other area, and then you improvise, and it goes further. So Tibet is one such place.
Okay. What is the origin and meaning of the term Vanara?
Of Vanar? Okay. Vanara, like I'm not a Sanskrit expert, and anytime I say that, my wife says, don't say that. One of the reasons is, of course, I never learned Sanskrit officially. It's a self-taught Sanskrit. Like many people will say, so Nilesh, how do I learn Sanskrit? I would say, don't begin with Sanskrit. First decide what is the strange thing you want to work on, start working on it. When you get stuck and now you must learn Sanskrit, then you learn Sanskrit. Because it's not an easy thing to do. But Vanara, the Sanskrit word, is like a Vishesh in the sense of a very special kind of Nara, like special kind of human beings. Just like in the military, Air Force, they have a special uniform. The Navy has a special uniform, and so on. So actually, if you look at the Valmiki Ramayana descriptions, it says when Hanumana, bit longer answer, Hanumana, Sugriv says to Hanumana, go and meet Ram and Lakshman. He says, go in the ordinary form, go in the ordinary human form. Okay, don't take the special Vanara form. So it's like a special mask or something that they are wearing when they are doing their particular job. But otherwise, they are human beings, Visheshanara, for a special kind of lifestyle they have chosen to live in the forest, or things like that. And therefore, they got some additional names such as the monkeys because they can also jump from the trees. They can also have some flying abilities. We don't know exactly how, the gliding, paragliding, we don't know that. But they also had, some of them at least had flying abilities.
Excellent. We're getting a lot of questions, so thank you. Keep them coming. Out of all of the astronomical descriptions and data points in Ramayana and Mahabharata, are there any references that do not reconcile with each other?
Well, not so much each other, but let's say there are great question. There are 300 astronomy descriptions in Mahabharata, I said. And if you solve this like a jigsaw puzzle and a crossword puzzle, they all point to 5561 BCE. Okay? Out of those 300, there are about 7. Okay? Prima facie, as the first round, they do not match or corroborate 5561 BCE. But if you go into the second round, and I'm not going to go into the details, I'll give you a metaphor of a tennis, for example. But you go into the second round, and you find that actually with some understanding, some interpretation, they do match. But suppose even if we don't do that, so what? In tennis, suppose it's a best of 5 game, okay, player A and player B. And let's say player A goes 6-0, 6-1, 6-0, just for an example. Or even extreme, 6-0, 6-0, 6-0. Everyone agrees that the player A won the game? Right? Match. Now, even when you see a score 6-0, 6-0, 6-0, you do know that the opposing player B might have actually scored few points. Fair? But still, when you look at the final score, you say 6-0, 6-0, or 6-2, 6-2, 6-2, 6-4, 6-2, 6-3, doesn't matter. This player is a winner. Compare that against this. Out of 300, the score is something like what? 300 plus minus 7. So still there is a very clear winner. In case of Ramayana, 600 plus descriptions. So it's like a 600 plus here minus 22. In case of Ramayana, there are 22 observations that do not match. And if you go dig deeper, like around 2, I will not take you there. Out of that, 16 observations are made at the equator. So what happens is, those 16 observations, when actually there is a spring, as per the Mahabharata timelines, they are saying it is autumn. And when it is autumn, they are saying spring in the descriptions. But how do you decide on the equator whether it is a spring or an autumn? Everyone follows? Like the Singapore weather. So those 16 also kind of, you take it on this side.
Okay. One question on Ram Setu. I think that comes up quite a lot. Is Ram Setu man-made? And second question about Ram Setu, which I've lost here. Here we go. Has the erosion of Ram Setu rocks been used for dating? And if so, what do they suggest?
Okay. First, we have to understand when you say Rama Setu, a physical structure, what are you referring to? If you are referring to a structure that connects Sri Lanka and India, then if you look at Valmiki Ramayana descriptions, if you look at the descriptions of Lanka in all Indian astronomy text, if you look at the descriptions of Ramayana, not the Valmiki Ramayana, but things written about Ramayana, even as simple as essays and plays and drama and whatnot, in the last 1,500 years in India, including Sri Lanka, by the way, everywhere, do you know what you find? That Sri Lanka is not Ravana's Lanka. I'll not go into the details of it because you can watch my videos. How many of you have a insomnia problem? Like tough time sleeping at night? Yeah, I have a cure with no side effects. At the bedtime, all you do is take out your smartphone, go to YouTube, type in search Nilesh Oak. You are going to get anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 videos. Select anyone. It works like magic. Sometime exceptions happens. You may not get a good night's sleep, but you will be very enlightened by the end of the night. Or you will get a great night's sleep. Okay, so there is a lot of that information about this. But once you understand Sri Lanka is not Lanka, then let's come to the Rama Setu. So that structure, basically it is a natural structure. And it was used for traveling between. In fact, there are some reports, I don't know how accurate they are, but even 600 years ago, people from Sri Lanka and India were using it to go back and forth during the low tide and stuff like that. Okay? But once you understand that Sri Lanka is not Lanka, that structure has no significance. Let me add you one more quick point. Valmiki Ramayana, in Valmiki Ramayana, Valmiki does not refer to the structure that is referring to that the Vanaras built to go to Ravana's Lanka as Ramasetu. He calls it Nalasetu, the architect. Mahabharata, there are Ramopakhyan 3 times. Like the whole story, Itihasa of Ramayana is narrated 3 times, and even there, not even once Vyasadeva refers to it as a Ramasetu but calls it Nalasetu. Bhagwan Ram has done such a great things, he doesn't need one more thing, it doesn't add anything to it. So let's give a credit where it is due, Nala.
Okay. We've got a few skeptics in the crowd. So one question is, how do you expect the next generation to understand this?
How do we expect the next generation to understand? Well, I would say, how does my generation, I'm in 50s, and folks before me understand it? We find, my experience of last 35 years researching this and about 15 years talking about it around the world, is that with like a next generation, I have not found. By the way, how many of you brought your children to today's program? Okay, can you stand for a minute? Actually, a lot of them. Yeah, please. Okay.
Just in some protection, there was an age limit. So there was an age limit.
There was, okay.
So some people wanted to bring younger children as well.
Yeah. So first thing, thank you for breaking the limits, breaking the rules and bringing them. Okay. That's what Mahatma Gandhi taught us, the salt satyagraha and whatnot. Okay. And if you can stand for a minute again, I think this is very important, what I'm saying. Those of you who brought your children with you, maybe within the limits, okay? All others, can you clap for them? Okay, if you have brought them, and if you, whatever you heard here today, thank you, please have a seat, thank you. If you just share what you do with your children, okay, keep the house transparent. I am not worried at all about Gen Z and whatever the new Gen Alpha or whatnot. They are extremely smart folks. Now it's a responsibility of grown-ups like me and all of you, that we tell these things in such a way that they just don't lose interest. Okay, if we tell in the interesting way that what captures their mind, actually I'm not worried at all. All we have to do is like what these great families did, they brought their children with them. Okay, please try to do the same. If not, go back and say, come here. 30 minutes, time starts now, and just share what you understood, what you learned. That will do the job.
So advice for those parents who didn't bring their kids. Next time, bring your kids. We'll do last one or two. Do you see any parallels between our ancient Indian civilization and other civilizations such as Egypt, Mesopotamia, Babylonians, etc.?
Okay. Slightly long answer, but let me give you that. A great question. Thank you. Do I see a parallels? In fact, many times people will ask me the question, like when Indians asking question, their tone will be like, yeah, but you are telling about us, but what about them or something? In a simple way, I say, actually, that's a fact, and the genetic data proves it. If you go back approximately 4,000 to 6,000 years in the past, there is no us versus them. It's only us. Okay? So now, coming to Egypt and Mesopotamia and all those areas, in fact, the Sumerians, everyone has heard the word Sumerians and Babylonians and so on. There's a huge, very original research taking place right now as we speak. Have you heard the name Yajnadevam? Nobody? Few. Okay? Rupa Bhatti and many others. Actually, they are looking at the Babylonian genealogy tables and Sumerian genealogy tables and Egyptian genealogy tables. You will find Indian names in it, the names of Indian kings. Okay? But let me give you quick 2 examples. Even how the foreign records, like the Babylonian or Greek records, match with what I just told you about Mahabharata and Ramayana. I'll just take these 2 examples. Megasthenes, everyone has heard the name? When the Alexander supposedly came, he wrote a book called Indica. It is lost, but many later authors like Pliny and Strabo, based on their writings, the book is like kind of recreated. Megasthenes talks about when he came to India, whenever that was, talks about Indians having a documented genealogical history going back to about 7,000 years. And this is, we don't know exactly time of Megasthenes, but let's say definitely more than 2,000 years ago. So he's talking about a history of about 9,000 years ago. If you do the calculations based on the personalities, Indian personalities Megasthenes mentions, and one that he mentions is Heracles, and if you look at the descriptions, we can definitely connect Heracles as same with the Krishna. And if you do the mathematics, it comes to 5,570 BCE. Compare that with 5561 BC. Quickly, let me tell you another Greek author, Herodotus, that I briefly mentioned. He wrote the book History of the World. From Greek, he went to Egypt, and he tells the story. Again, those people who want to keep me honest, you can go to archive.org, you can download Herodotus' History of the World. Okay, book number 2, chapter 124 through 143. He talks about, so Herodotus went to Egypt and a pharaoh or somebody there, he made him walk along the Nile and he showed him some 341 statues. And then said, this guy is a son of this guy is a son of this, his name is this, he's a son of this, and so on. And then that fellow told Herodotus, for 3 kings on an average, there were about 100 years. If you do the math for 341, it comes to 11,340 years. For simplicity, let's take that as 11,500 years. The time of Herodotus is when? 500 BC, that's 2,500 years ago. 11,500 plus 2,500, how much? 14,000 years ago. Now, this is in chapter 142, 143. Go back to chapter 124. That pharaoh told Herodotus, he said, all these statues that I showed you, these are ordinary human beings. But when it started, the first guy was not ordinary human being. Okay, he was like a god, whatever the word that was used between the Egyptian and the Greek language. And his rule was so extraordinary that it was like a perfect, the utopia. And the name of that king, the very first king, the pharaoh told Herodotus, was Ramphsinitos. Now, I'll leave rest to your imagination. Thank you.
We'll do a final, very brief question. Where was the real Lanka?
Where was the real Lanka? You have to start drawing a straight line from Kurukshetra. Everyone knows Kurukshetra, Thanesar, Haryana. Okay, draw a line that goes through the Ujjain, and keep in mind that it's not a straight, it's a spear. Earth is a spear. You have to draw on that spear straight line that goes down from the North Pole to Kurukshetra to Ujjain. If you draw the line all the way to the equator, the point is just east of Malay or Maldives. Right now it's a deep ocean, but based on all the evidence, that's where Ravana's Lanka was. Right now, just a deep ocean, nothing there. You can scuba dive if you like.
Look, I think we will wrap up there. Big round of applause for Nilesh ji. And I think, please, Nilesh ji always says, keep reading, keep extending your knowledge, keep seeking answers, but don't be sucked into the mythological lens. All right, keep getting the answers. So, Nilesh ji, I think we'll take a seat. Thank you.
Namaste, everyone. What a meaningful and inspiring afternoon it has been. As a father of 2 children, I feel very hopeful that seeing my children growing up in Australia, learning about greatness of Indian civilization. The best part is they're learning through the application of subjects like math, astronomy, science, technology, and philosophy. This is very special to me. It reminds me for being a child back in India when we used to learn from a community. Being here today, it has brought some memories. To make it better, to make even things better, that we are doing this in Australia at the amazing venue where I call this my second home. As we come to the end of this event at the Federation Square, it is my great pleasure to say a few words of thanks. First, a very big thank you to Nilesh ji for providing the learning, the 35 years of work, putting in a simple way of understanding. Let's give him one more round of applause, please. You made us think, reflect, and look at our history in the new way. You helped us to reconnect with our wisdom and knowledge, our history, texts, and traditions. Thank you for traveling all the way to Melbourne and sharing your work, ideas with us. You made us this day very special. We are truly grateful. To the amazing team of Optic Australia and the partner organization, thank you for all your work you have put in. I know it hasn't been easy, so thank you from bottom of my heart. A special thank you to our sponsors, Blue Heart Community Care, ATBL Accounting and Brokerage, Savita Healthcare, and Buy the Car. Your support has helped us to bring a respectful speaker like Nilesh ji to this wonderful, beautiful venue. And finally, to each and every one of you who have come today, thank you. Thank you for giving your time, your attention, the energy you have bring to this venue today. As you go home tonight, I hope you carry with you not just a fact and ideas, but also a stronger feeling of connection with our history and with each other. I would like to request everyone to share what we have learned today with others out there. This is just a beginning. From the energy I have felt in this room, I can confidently say that many more such events will follow, helping us to grow as a community and stay connected to our rich culture. Let's continue to support more events like this. Once again, thank you, Nilesh ji. Thank you, Optic Australia team. Thank you, partner organizations. Thank you, sponsors. And thank you, everybody. Have a safe journey home. Dhanyavad. Subratri.